Hello guys, I'm Yadagiri and welcome to my channel HVR Tutorials. In this video, I'm going to talk about how you can execute your test in parallel using TestNG. So this is the agenda for today's session guys. First we will see what is parallel execution and then why do we need the parallel execution, and also we will see how to perform the parallel execution. So these are the 3 points we are going to cover inside this video guys. So not just these 3 points, but I'm going to cover few more points on the fly. So I have not listed here, but I'm going to cover few more points with you, which are important in interview point of view and to understand this concept clearly also. Fine. So because I'm going to cover few more points and all these 3 points can take some time, so this video can become very lengthy video guys. So if you watch this video completely, then only you will understand this concept clearly. So I'll request all of you to watch this video till the end. So don't skip the video in any part, please watch the video completely. Then only you will get this concept very clearly guys. So it is a very important topic in TestNG. Not because TestNG is providing this feature, but because we are going to use this feature extensively in our projects. So this is a very helpful feature provided by the TestNG. Fine. So that is why we need to learn this concept guys. So without wasting any time, let's get started. So before proceeding with any of these points, I want to explain few more points guys. Okay. So first you need to get familiar with two terms. First one is sequential and the second one is parallel. So first you need to understand what are these two terms and then we can jump into the topic. So if you don't understand these two terms, right? So it's very difficult to understand this topic itself completely. Fine. So what exactly is a sequential? So sequential means one after the other. So it is going to be in sequence order. What is a sequence? In sequence, if you take any sequence, the number sequence or any sequence, one after the other, right? So sequential means one after the other. So let's write here, one after the other. And the next one is parallel. So what is parallel? Parallel means side by side, not just one after the other, but it is going to be side by side. So let's write side by side here. Fine. So let me tell you one small example so that you will understand guys. So what are your daily activities and how do you perform those daily activities on a usual basis? So first you will wake up and then you will brush your teeth and then you eat your breakfast and then go to office and come back and eat and then sleep. So probably you will have more things to do, but I'm just listing down on the high level, right? So you wake up and then brush and then eat and then go to office, come back from the office and eat and then sleep. So you are going to perform each and every of these tasks in one by one order, right? So one after the other. First you will wake up and then only you will brush your teeth. So once you complete your brushing, then you will go for breakfast. So once you finish your breakfast, you will take the bath. So once you finish your bath, you will go to office and then you will complete your office and you will return to the home. And once you return from the office to home, then you will start eating your dinner and then you will sleep. So you are performing every action one after the other, right? So that is sequential. But sometimes we perform some other tasks in parallel. Like let's say you want to read the newspaper or you want to watch the news in the TV while eating. So what exactly it is? It is like multitasking, right? So you're doing the task side by side. You are eating at the same time you are listening to the news or you are watching the news or you are reading the news, right? And at the same time, you're trying to do some other task also. Maybe browse through your emails or something. So these are multitasking. So multitasking is a best example for parallel guys. Fine. So in the parallel, you are performing the actions side by side, not one after the other. So you are eating and at the same time you are watching the news, or maybe you are, surfing the internet. You are, checking your emails. Like that, you are performing the task side by side, right? So that is parallel. So first you need to get familiar with these two words, then you can go for this topic guys. So now you got the clear idea about these two words, right? Sequential means it's like a sequence. So you are going to perform the actions one after the other. And in the parallel, you are going to perform the actions side by side. Fine. So now you tell me what exactly is parallel testing? Parallel testing or parallel execution means you are executing your test cases side by side, not one after the other. So usually till now what we have discussed, we have seen how to write the test case and how to, utilize some of the features from the TestNG and all, right? But we never use the parallel testing in those things. So whenever I have one or two test cases, it will be executing one after the other, not parallelly, right? Not side by side kind of thing. So first it will execute the first test case and then it will execute the second one. So that is called as sequential execution. You got it? So that is called as sequential execution. So let me just write it here. Sequential execution. So whenever you are writing and whenever you are executing any test cases without mentioning parallel, those test cases will be executed in the sequential order. So it will execute first one test case, and once one is completed and it will pick the next one. And when that is completed, it will pick the next one. Like that, it will execute your test cases one after the other. So that is why we are calling it as sequential execution. But in the parallel execution, we are not going to follow like that. We are going to execute our test cases side by side, right? So we are going to execute our test cases side by side, and till now we haven't seen how to do that. So in this video, we are going to see that. So now you got what exactly a parallel execution is, right? So parallel execution means executing your test or executing your test cases side by side. So that is called as parallel execution. So why do we need the parallel execution? So obviously you will save the time, right? So when you are performing multitasking, what exactly you are going to achieve from that? You will save a lot of time. So while eating, you are watching the news. So you don't have to spend extra time to watch the news, right? So you're eating at the same time you're watching the news, or you're eating at the same time you're going through your emails. So you no need to spend extra time for that, right? So you're performing multiple tasks within same time. So you are going to save a lot of time in that, right? So in the similar way, here in TestNG also, or here in automation testing also, when you are performing the parallel execution, you are going to save a lot of time. Why? Because let's say I have 5 test cases, okay? So first one is taking like 5 minutes, and the second one is taking maybe 10 minutes, and the third one is taking, let's say, 5 minutes again, okay? And then fourth one is taking again like 5 minutes, and fifth one is taking 10 minutes. So on overall, if I want to execute these 5 test cases in the sequential execution manner, how much time I need to wait to get my results? So 5 plus 10, 15, 15 plus 5, 20, 25 and 35 minutes. So overall it is 35 minutes, right? So 35 minutes I need to wait till my execution is completed, right? So your execution is going to take 35 minutes of your time when you are executing in the sequential execution manner. But when you are executing them in the parallel order, that means side by side. So if you are executing all the 5 test cases side by side, how much time maximum it can take? 10 minutes, right? So if you are executing side by side all these things, all the test cases are executing at the same time. So all will be triggered at the same time, but one test case may be completed in 5 minutes, and the next one is going to take 10 minutes, and next one is going to take 5 minutes, and then 5 and 10. So maximum, so to complete all of your testing, you need to maximum wait 10 minutes of time, right? So even if your system is having low performance or something, because you are executing all the things side by side, you may wait like extra 1 minute or something, right? So it's only 11 minutes of time. So how much time you are actually saving here? Look at the stats, guys. Only 5 test cases I'm taking. And for 5 test cases itself, it's actually, 24 minutes of difference is there, right? So there's a 24 minutes of difference only for 5 test cases. But look at your test suite. So your real-time scenarios, it may have 1000 test cases, or it may have 2000 test cases. So out of all those things, how much time you can actually save? So if you have 2000 test cases, you're not going to execute all the 2000 side by side, guys. So I'll clarify that one, okay? So you're not going to execute all the 2000 side by side because your system is not a supercomputer. Your system is not a supercomputer to handle 2000 threads at the same time. So if you want to execute n number of threads or n number of test cases, your system also should support that. If your system is not able to handle that, then it's waste of time, okay? So your system also should support, but basically every system will support at least minimum of 2 threads or 3 threads at least, okay? So you can still leverage the parallel execution concept and reduce your execution time. Even if you have 1000 test cases, and if you are assuming every test case is taking only 1 minute of time, and you have 1000 test cases, how much time it will take? 1000 minutes of your time, right? But if you are executing 2 tests side by side, then how much time it will take? Only 500 minutes, right? So you are executing 2 test cases side by side. So every time it is going to pick 2 test cases. Like that, you have 1000. So 1000 by 2, obviously you have only 500, right? So it will take 500 minutes. Even then you are saving a lot of time, right? So even if you don't execute all the 5 or all the 1000 test cases parallelly, if you are executing only 2 tests also parallelly, you are going to save a lot of time, guys. Lot of time. Okay. So that is why this feature is very, very, very important to us. In our real-time scenarios, we don't want to spend a lot of time in executing the test cases. We want to get the results done quickly. So as quickly as possible. Okay. So we don't want to wait so much time. So in those scenarios, this is the savior for us. So this is the feature that is going to help a lot in our future. Fine. So that is why we need to understand this concept very clearly. So now you tell me, why do we need the parallel execution? We need the parallel execution to save our time, to save our execution time, right? So what is parallel execution? Parallel execution means executing your test cases side by side. And why do we need the parallel execution? To save the execution time. And then third point comes, how to perform the parallel execution. Now I know what is parallel execution and why do we need that, and the importance of the parallel execution also I understand. But why? How to perform the parallel execution? So let's look at that. So let me take you to the Eclipse. So here, let me create one special package. So I'll just name it as com.hfire.paralleltest. And within this, let's create some classes. I'll name it as test class 1. And within this, I want to add some test methods. So what is a test method? So you already know. If you add any Java method and on top of that, if you put the test annotation, then it will become the test method, right? So let's quickly add the test methods. So within the test method, I'm going to just write the sysout statement. I'm not going to execute any Selenium related code, but I'm going to just write the sysout statement. So here, I'll just write like this, test class 1, and then I'll just give some separator like this. And I want to identify the name of the method. And after that, I want to get the thread number. Okay. So whenever you are executing any test in Java, so every test is going to be executed on some thread. So if you are performing any actions, not just test case execution, guys, if you are performing any action, first Java will create one thread for you, and then it will start executing those operations. Even if you try to print hello world in the console. Fine. So let's just look at the thread number dot, you can get the name of the thread or you can get the ID of the thread also. So I'm just getting the ID of the thread. So like this, I'm going to repeat these things, guys. Okay. I don't want to keep only one method inside the test class. I want to, multiply it. So I'll just take it like this. I'm going to add 4 test methods inside this, and let's rename this to 2, 3, and 4 because we need to have unique names for our test methods, right? So the class name is going to be same thing, but our test method names are going to be changing, right? So it's 3 and then it is 4. So this we don't need to change. So the first class is ready, and like that I want to repeat the classes also. So not just the test methods, but I want to repeat the classes also. So let's create 3 classes. So within the second class, I want to again rename the methods. So in the first class already we got 4 methods. So here I'm starting with 5, 6, and 7. I want to keep only 3 methods inside this one. I want to rename this to 2 because it is inside the test class 2. And these things also let me rename 5, 6, and 7. So now till 7 is completed inside this class, and let's go to test class 3, and here let's change these things. So 7 already completed here, right? So let's take from 9, and then 10. So let's rename this one also, and let's take 11 also here, not an issue. So I'll just take this one as 3 and 3 and 3. So this is completed, guys. Okay, I have created 3 test classes, and in each class I have added some methods. So in the first class I have added 4 methods, and in the second class I have added only 3 methods, and in the third class I have added 4 methods. And also I'm printing some sysout statement, just which class is being executed and which method is being executed and in which thread it is actually being executed. Fine. So first let's execute any of the class from here and let's see the output. So let me execute this, run as TestNG test. So let's go to the console. So here you can see TestNG has executed all the 4 methods present inside the test class 1, right? So test class 1 has 4 methods, you can see. So test class 1 has 4 methods, test method 1, 2, 3, and 4. So all the 4 methods are executed and it has printed the statements also here. And if you closely observe, right? So the thread ID is 1 here. That means TestNG has created only one thread and it is trying to execute your test methods on the same thread. So on the same thread, how it is executing? First, it will try to execute test method 1. And once this is completed, it will try to execute test method 2. And once this is completed, it will try to execute test method 3. And then this is completed, it will try to execute 4. So this is called as sequential execution, correct? So we have learned that sequential execution means one after the other. So here the same thing is happening, guys. TestNG has created only one thread for you. Thread is nothing but a process inside the Java, guys. Thread is nothing but a process, you can say. So TestNG has created only one thread for you. So obviously TestNG has to utilize the same thread. So it has to execute the first method and then it has to execute the second method and then third and then fourth. So it is executing one after the other. That is called as sequential execution. So it is executing the test cases in the sequential because we haven't introduced any parallel execution concept here, guys. Okay. So by default, TestNG follows the sequential execution only. Whenever you explicitly mention the parallel execution concept, then only it will try to consider that. Otherwise, it will try to execute your test in the sequential order only. Fine. So now let's learn the TestNG's parallel execution concept. So I'll just create one TestNG XML file. You know how to create the TestNG XML file already, right? So you can go to file menu and create new file and then provide the name and then, just copy paste that common syntax that you have. Or you can generate the TestNG XML file also. Right click on your any file and then go to TestNG and then convert to TestNG. So I'll just click on finish. So I'm not going to explain much about the TestNG XML file creation because we already knew that. So this is the file that we actually created, guys. Okay, we have created this time in the root directory. Earlier we were using in the resources folder, right? So this time we created in the root directory itself. So let's go into that and let's just modify this a little bit. So by default, when you create any TestNG XML file, it will try to include thread count variable here. So I'll just remove that. I'll tell you what if you have that variable, what happens and all I will tell you. Okay, don't worry at all. So let's just remove that one first. And then let's create 3 test cases. Let's create 3 test cases here. So one test case means one test here entirely, right? From this test opening to test closing, you call it as one test case. But some people call that classes also test case. So it depends on your requirement basically. So if you put all your test case steps inside one single class, then you can call your class as a test case. But if you are referring to multiple methods from different classes, then you need to create tests like this for one test case. Right? So let's create 3 test cases here and I'll just format these. So I'll rename these things to test 1, test 2 and test 3. That's it. Fine. So now let me rename these things also. We have test class 1 and test class 2 and test class 3. Correct? So why did it create this XML file? So if you want to introduce the TestNG parallel execution concept, you need to introduce this TestNG XML file, guys. You cannot introduce the parallel execution concept within the classes. If you want to execute parallelly, then you need to introduce the TestNG XML concept. I mean, TestNG XML you need to create. Fine. So that is why I have created the TestNG XML file. But here also, if you don't introduce the concept of parallel execution, by default, it will try to execute in the sequential order. Correct? So let's see that first. So if you go to here, you can see the thread ID is only 1. That means only one thread is created by the TestNG and all the test cases are executed within that thread. So first one test case, test 1 is executed, which has test class 1, and test 2, which has test class 2, and then test 3, which has test class 3. So all are executed in the same thread, correct? So one after the other, that is why we are calling it as test sequential execution. Okay. So now let's introduce the parallel execution concept. So for parallel execution, there are 2 parameters that you need to remember, guys. The first parameter is parallel. And the second parameter is thread count. So these are the two parameters that we are going to use for parallel execution concept. So these are the parameters, or you can say not the parameters, or you can say attributes, because this is a XML file, right? So you can say attributes. Okay. So these are the two attributes that we are going to use for parallel execution concept. So you can use these two attributes at the suit level or at the test level also. Based on your convenience, you can use it. You can use it at the suit level or you can use it at the test level also. It won't throw any exception and it will still work as it is. Okay. So how it is actually expected to work, that is the way it will actually work. Fine. So first let's use it at the suit level and then we will go to the test level, guys. So here first let's introduce the parallel. So just write PAR and then press Control space. You can see parallel attribute is there. And within this, there are so many attribute values, right? So if this is the attribute, this is the attribute value. So there are so many attribute values available here. So there is a for classes, false, instances, methods, none, test, and true. So first let's use none and then false and then one by one. Okay. So let's use none and let me create some thread count also. Thread count means how many threads you want to actually create. So how many tests you want to run side by side, that is the thread count. So whatever the thread count that you mention here, those many threads will be created by the TestNG and it will try to execute those many test cases from your suit. Fine. So thread count, I'll just mention it as 2. Okay. So when you mention the thread count as 2, that means TestNG should create 2 threads, right? So let's see what happens. So let me execute this. And you can see there is only one thread created, guys. So it's not creating 2 threads actually. If there are 2 threads created, obviously your thread ID will be modified, right? So it's only showing 1 as the thread ID. That means it is creating only 1 thread in your execution. What is wrong here then? I have mentioned it as 2, but what is wrong? When you mention the parallel attribute and when you take the value as none, TestNG does not consider this thread count at all. So indirectly, you are saying the TestNG to execute your test in the sequential mode only. You're not asking your TestNG to execute in the parallel because you set the value as none. So when you set the value as none or false, you are telling TestNG to execute your test in the sequential order. When you are executing test in the sequential order, thread count parameter will not be considered at all. Even though it is provided, it is useless parameter. So now even if you expand, you can see the thread ID is only 1, right? That means even if you provide the parallel attribute value as false or if you provide the parallel attribute as none, TestNG will not consider the thread count at all and it will try to execute in the sequential order. So let's note that point here. So for this and for none, TestNG will try to execute the test cases in the sequential execution order. So I'll just mention SE, sequential execution. Okay. And then one more thing I'll show you. So even if you mention any of the values, so there are so many values here, right? So if you mention any of these values and if you mention the thread count as 1, still it will be considered as sequential execution only. Why? Because you're asking TestNG to execute something in the parallel. But how many threads you are actually asking to create? Only 1 thread. When you create only 1 thread, it's called sequential execution. It's not a parallel execution, right? So when you ask TestNG to create only 1 thread, it will execute in the sequential order only. So let's execute this. And you can see 20, 20, 20, 20, 20. That means only 1 thread ID is created here. Correct? So that is also sequential execution only. When you mention the thread count as 1, that is also going to be a sequential execution only. So it doesn't matter what you set to the parallel value. So even if you set as test or if you set as classes or if you set as instances or methods. So there are so many other values, right? So any of the value you pick from this, but when you set the thread count as 1, it will be a sequential execution only. Fine. So that is one more thing that you need to remember. And the next thing is you cannot provide the thread count as negative value, guys. If you provide the thread count as negative -1 or -2 or anything, it will throw the exception for you because you cannot create negative threads, right? You can create only positive number of threads. You cannot create negative number of threads, right? So it will throw you one exception. So the exception name is illegal argument exception. You see? if you provide the negative thread count, it will try to throw you one exception. So your thread count should always be an positive integer value. You got that? So your thread count should always be positive integer value. Even if you mention as -1 or -100 also, it is going to throw the same exception for you. Your thread count should be a positive integer value. That you need to remember. So let's just keep that and let's note that point also. So these are the extra points, guys. So these are the points I'm trying to cover while explaining you the concept itself. So what is the exception it is throwing? So this is the exception. Okay. So when you mention thread count as negative value, it can be -1 or it can be -2 or any value, any negative value, it will try to throw the illegal argument exception. And the next, we will start the actual thing here. So I'll just mention thread count as 2 and then parallel as test. So there are so many attributes here, right? Parallel as test and parallel as classes and then methods and then instances. So I'm not going to explain instances much here because the instances are used only when you are using the factory. So when you create any factory annotation and if you try to create the instances from that, you will use the instances here. But otherwise we don't use the instances mostly. So, I mean, because the TestNG is provided these things, it's not mandatory rule that you need to use all of these things. TestNG has been created not just for the Selenium automation testing, right? You can use TestNG for a lot of things. You can use it for API automation, you can use it for unit testing and a lot of things, right? So that is why all the parameters are actually provided, but it's not like you need to use all of them. So we are going to learn classes and test and methods, these three things, guys. Fine. So first we will see test and then we will go to classes and then we will go to methods because that is the order, right? You have one test and inside the test you have class and inside the class you have methods. So that is why first we will see test. So when you mention parallel equal to test and when you provide some thread count, this is called as parallel execution. Now you are introducing the concept of parallel execution. Your thread count should be more than 1 and it should be a positive integer value only. And then your parallel should be any of the test or class or methods or instances value. So that is when you have introduced the parallel execution concept. So now what exactly it means? What is parallel equal test? So you are asking TestNG to create 2 threads for you, but which one has to be executed within the thread? Which one has to be executed? So basically you have test, you have class, you have method inside the XML file, right? So within the suite, you have test, you have class, we have methods also. Within the class, you can mention the methods also using include tag, right? So which one you want to execute in the parallel? That is what you have to mention here. So when I mention parallel equal test, from all of my tests, so 2 threads are actually created here. So 2 tests will be executed at the same time, side by side. So if any of those 2 are completed, my third test will be picked into that thread. Fine. So let me just first create one diagram for you. 3 test cases I have. T1, 3 tests I have, T2 and T3. So I have 3 tests and I'll just create this one. So it's, you can say a thread pool or something. Okay. So let me just name this one as thread pool. So the number of threads that are actually created inside this, that is the thread pool that I'm saying. Okay. So let's consider now I am creating only 2 threads. So this is one thread and this is one thread. Only 2 threads are there and I want to execute 3 test cases here. So how do I execute? At the same time, only one can go inside this one, right? So first T1 can go inside this one and T2 can go inside this one. So T3 has to wait. T3 has to wait until any of this thing is completed. So until any of this thing is completed, T3 has to wait. If T1 is completed, T3 will be pushed into T1. If, for example, if T2 is completed, T3 will be pushed into T2. So there is no guarantee which one is going to be executed first. Okay. So we don't know, right? So whether T1 will execute or T2 will execute first, we don't know. Because based on the time, it will be executing. So if the T1 taking less time, then T1 will finish first. If T2 is taking less time, T2 will finish first. So if any of this thread becomes free, then your remaining test will go into that one. But at the same time, at any given point of time, only 2 tests can run in parallel. When you mention parallel equal test, That means you are asking TestNG to execute the test in parallel. Okay, test in parallel. That means all the classes and methods present inside this test will be triggered into the same thing. So when you mention this parallel equal test, right, by default, it will push one test into this thread. So once the test is inside the thread, it will start executing in the sequential order again. Correct? So it will start executing in the sequential order within that thread. But all the methods within the classes or within the test is going to be executed within the same thread. You got that? So let's execute this and let's see how many threads will be created and how it is actually executing. And you can see the console. So 21, 22 and only 21 and 22 are created, right? So if you go to the diagram, so I'm mentioning only 2 threads should be created. So this is 21 and this is 22, let's say. Okay. So first within 21, which one is going? Test class 1 is going into 21 thread. So test class 1 is going into 21 thread. So let's take red marker here. So test class 1 is going into 21, and in test class 1, all the methods are executed in 21 only. You see, test class 1, test method 1, test class 1, test method 2, and test class 1, test method 3, and test class 1, test method 4. All are executed in 21 thread only. That means within the same thread, all the methods are executed, right? So we have mentioned only one class within the test 1. If you mention multiple classes, all the methods will be executed within the same thread. But we have mentioned only one class here. So that is why it is showing only one class here. So next, in second thread, test 2 will be executed, right? So test 2 is actually executing which one? Test class 2. So if you see 22, test class 2, test 4 method 22, and test class 2, test method 7 in 22, and this one also in 22, right? So T2 is executed in 22. T1 and T2 are running in parallel, and out of T1 and T2, which one is completed first? T2 is completed first. So T3 came in and T3 replaced this position. That means T1 and T3 are running now. So T3 replaced the T2 position because T2 is completed. That means test 2 is completed. So that's why you can see test class 3 is executed in 22. T2 is completed, so T3 is triggered into 22. So at the same time, only maximum 2 tests can run here because you are specifying the thread count as 2. If you mention the thread count as 3 threads will be created. And how many number of test cases you have? You have only 3 test cases. So what happens? Each test case will go into one thread. So no need to wait, right? So earlier your number of test cases are more than your threads. So you have to wait. You have to wait until one test is completed within the one thread. So you have to wait and then you have to push your test. But now you don't have to wait. All your 3 test cases can go into 3 threads, right? T1 can go into 1, T2 can go into 1, T3 can go into 1. So let's see that. So now let me execute this. And if you see 20, 21 and 22, 3 threads are created. And if you closely observe this, test class 2 executed in 21. So all the test class 2 instances should be in 21 only. You see, test class 2 instance is 21, test class 2 instance is 21. And then test class 3 is executed in 22. So all the test class 3 instances should be inside the 22 only. So this is 22 and this is 22 and these 2 are 22. Correct? And then remaining one is test class 1. Test class 1 is executed inside 20. And here also you can see 20. So you have only 3 tests and you have 3 threads. So it's equally distributed, guys. But what if you have 10 test cases and you're trying to create only 2 threads? What happens in that scenario? So let's just add 10 test case here. So what if you have 10 test cases, but you have created only 2 threads here? So how do you create the threads? Simply mention the thread count as 2 here. Okay. So whatever the thread count that you mention, those many threads will be created in TestNG, guys. So let's say I have created only 2 threads. That means I have mentioned the value as 2 here and I have 10 test cases. What happens in that scenario? First 2 will be triggered. So 2 test cases will be triggered into these 2 threads. So one will go into one thread and the other one will go into another thread. Then 8 will be remaining. 8 will be waiting. So it will be waiting, and when any of that is completed, the next one will go. So let me put you in a simple terms, guys. Okay, you went into restaurant. So you, along with your friends, you went into a restaurant. There is only one table which has the capacity of 2 members to sit. There is only one table which has the capacity to sit only 2 members, but your group is containing 10 people. So how many can go and have the lunch at the same time? Only 2, right? If any of those 2 persons has completed their lunch, they will take their plate and they will go to the washroom. So the place is empty. So from your remaining friends, one person can go and sit there and they can have the lunch. Like that, you will complete, right? At any point of time, only 2 persons can have the lunch because there is only 2 threads, 2 seats only are available. So only 2 persons can have the lunch at the same time. Correct? The remaining people have to wait until they get the seat. So if one seat is empty, then only they can go and join into that seat. Otherwise, they have to keep on waiting. Okay? So this is one scenario, guys. So this is one scenario, and there is a reverse based scenario also. That is, so let's say you are creating some number of threads. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you and your group of friends are going into one restaurant, and basically you people are actually 5 only. So let me just write it as 5. So you have only 5 friends. Your group is containing only 5 members, but there are 8 seats available. So what do? Each one will go and sit into one place. So 3 seats will be vacant here, right? So they are still empty only. So they will be ideal. Okay. Even though there are empty seat, you cannot go and sit into that seat because you can sit only in one seat. You cannot go and sit into these seats, right? Only 5 seats can be occupied by these 5 people. So if your number of tests are less than the number of threads created, then the remaining threads will be in ideal position. You got my point? If you have only 5 members to eat and there are 8 seats, only 5 members will go and occupy 5 seats. The remaining 3 seats will be always empty only because you don't have the members there. But what if you have 10 members and 8 seats? So first 8 seats will be filled by 8 people and 2 people will be remaining. And if any of those 8 people are completed their lunch, these 2 people will go and join in those places, right? They will occupy those places. So that's how this will work, guys. Okay. So now you understand this concept, right? So if you understand this concept for one thing, it's easy to understand for all the other parameters here. Fine. So this parallel equal test can be used only at the suit level. You cannot use this parallel equal test at the test level. It won't throw you any exception, but it doesn't make any sense to you because parallel equal test means it has to execute the test in the parallel. But when you mention this one at the test level, if you mention this one here, so within the test, you don't have another test, right? Within the test, you don't have another test. Within the test, what you have only classes and methods. Within the test, you don't have other test. So how it will execute in the parallel then? It won't execute, right? So that is why this parallel equal test can be only accepted at the suit level. Even if you provide at the test level, it won't work actually. Fine. And next we have classes here. So what exactly this classes is? So it will try to create these many threads. Whenever it is executing one test, it will try to create these many threads and it will trigger the classes in the parallel execution mode, not the test. Your test is going to be executed in the sequential order only, but whenever one test is picked within the test, how many number of classes are there, those will be executed in the parallel mode. Fine. Those will be executed in the parallel mode, guys. So let me show you that. So now I have one test with 3 classes. So this time when you mention thread count as 2, what happens? Your test will go in sequential order, but within the test, your classes can go in parallel mode. Okay. That means this class can execute in one thread and this can execute in one thread and this can be executed in any of the thread that is freed by these 2 classes. Because you are creating only 2 threads here, right? So let's execute this and see. So it should create 2 threads. So let's go to console. You see 23 and 24. That means only 2 threads are created and test class 1 is executed inside the test 23 thread. If you look at all the instances of test class 1, that means all the test methods coming from test class 1 are executed in the same thread. So test class 1, test method 2 is executed in 23 and this one also 23 and this one also 23. That means the entire test class 1 along with its test methods is executed in 23 thread. And then test class 2 is picked into 24, right? So test class 2 is executed in 24, test class 2 executed in 24, test class 2 executed in 24. The entire test class 2 along with its test methods is executed in another thread. So here, did you observe the point? All the test classes are executed in the parallel execution mode. Earlier, tests are executed in the parallel mode, but now the test classes within the test is executed in the parallel mode. Okay. So that is this parameter, guys. So which one you want to actually distribute in the parallel, that you need to specify here. If you want to distribute your test in the parallel, then you need to specify test. If you want to distribute your classes within the test in the parallel, then you need to specify this as classes. If you want to distribute the methods, then you can specify it as methods. Fine. So mostly we will be using parallel equal methods and parallel equal classes at the test level, not at the suit level, guys, because when you use at the test level, you have the proper control. When you use at the suit level, you don't have the proper control, but when you use at the test level, you have the proper control, right? But for test, it has to be always at the suit level only. If you want to execute your test in the parallel mode, it has to be always at the suit level only. But for methods and classes, it can be at the test level. So the best thing is to be at the test level only, because you have proper control. You have proper control on what you want to actually execute for each test. Fine. So let me just put this one here. So I'll just mention the classes here, and let's create one more test. So this is test 2, and here I'll create one more class, guys, just for showing you this one with clear example. So this is test 4. So I'll just rename this one. So I'm not going to rename the method names, but I have renamed the class name. It's fine, right? So, okay, I'll just go into this one and I'll remove these two and I'll specify this one as 4. So now I have actually 2 tests, and the first test is having 3 classes and the second test is having only 1 class. Fine. So I want to execute only the first one in the parallel mode, but not the second one. Then I can use this way. So what happens? Whatever the threads that are created inside this one will be destroyed within this test. And then test 2 will be gone. So first it will trigger in sequential order only, guys. It will not actually trigger in the parallel mode first of all. Okay. Why? Because you haven't mentioned anything at the suit level. So whatever the tests that are present inside the suit are going to be triggered in the sequential order, one test after the other. Okay. But when one test is triggered within the test, whatever the classes that you have mentioned, those will be triggered in the parallel mode. Fine. So let's see this. So you see, so whatever the threads that are created as part of the test 1 are destroyed after the test 1. And in test 2, a new thread is created. You got it? So you can also see 25 and 26. So as part of the test 1, 2 threads are created and your classes are sharing those 2 threads. Even though if you have 3 classes, it will share only those 2 threads. That means first 2 will be going in and then one has to wait. And if any of the thread is free, then the other one will go in. So like that, it will execute, guys. The same way you can mention the methods also. When you mention the methods, all the methods present inside these classes. So first class has 4 methods, second one has 3, and then third one has 4. 4 plus 4 plus 3. How much it is? 11. So 11 methods will be triggered in parallel with a 2 thread count within the first test. But for the second test, it doesn't matter. Okay, so let's execute this and see. Now you see. So for the second test, all the methods are executed in the same thread because we haven't introduced any parallel execution concept in the test 2. Fine. But in test 1, all the 10 methods are executed in 2 threads. Okay, you see 26 and 27, 2 threads are created and 1 is executed in 26 and 2 is executed in 27 and then 3 executed in 26, 4 executed in 27. So you can see all the methods are executed parallelly in 2 threads within the test 1. So if you mention this one at the class level, what happens? I mean at the suit level, what happens? First test 1 will go. Okay, first test 1 will go and then test 2 will go sequentially. Test will go in sequentially, but when this test is going sequentially, within the test, all the methods will be executed parallelly. So once this test is completed, whatever the threads that are created within this test will be destroyed and new set of threads will be created within test 2. Fine, let's understand this. So I'll execute this. So basically you are expecting only 2 threads should be created, but no. As part of test 1, 2 will be created and they will be destroyed, and as part of test 2, 2 more will be created. Now if you see, totally 4 threads will be there. 26, 27, 28 and 29. You see the order also? So this is test 2, right? So test 2 is executed in the last. So first entire test 1 is executed. So after that only test 2 is executed. So it's going in the sequential order, right? Your tests are going in the sequential order, but within the test, your methods are going in the parallel order, correct? So that is your execution concept, guys, here. So even the same applies to classes also. So when you mention classes, your test will go in the sequential order only. First test will go and then second test will go. But within the test, whatever the classes are present, those will be going in the parallel mode. So if you execute this, you can see. So the first test is going in, okay? So the first test is going in and 2 threads are created, 27 and 28. And after the test 1 is completed, those 2 threads are killed. They will be destroyed because those are created as part of the test. So they will be destroyed. And then a new thread is created. Only 1 is created here because, actually there are 2 threads created, but you are only using 1 thread because you have only 1 class here. The other thread is sitting remaining, right? Idle, like this, okay? 2 threads created, but the other one is sitting idle, okay? So this is how you are going to execute your test in the parallel execution mode, guys. You can specify your parallel and thread count attributes at the suit level or at the test level also. When you set it at the test level, it will only applicable to the test. But when you set it at the suit level, it will be applicable to all the tests present inside the suit. But parallel equal test can be applicable only at the suit level because suit can contain the test, not the test can contain tests. Okay, test will not have subtests. So only test will have one test. Correct? So that's why parallel equal test is only applicable at the suit level, not at the test level. But parallel equal to classes, parallel equal to methods, parallel equal to instances are applicable at the test level also. Fine. So you need to remember all these points, guys. You need to remember all of these points. These all are very, very, very important points because you will be asked these points in the interview. I have seen so many people doesn't understand these concepts properly and they will just try to answer randomly. So if I give you this question, so if you don't actually learn from me, so if I try to give you this question, what people usually think is, they will think like we are creating only 2 threads. So that means 28 and 29 only will be created. But no, guys. So you are mentioning parallel equal to classes, correct? That means your test will go in the sequential order only. But as part of the test execution, when one test is being executed, you are creating the threads and you are distributing your classes within the threads. And then once the thread is completed, once the test is completed, you are destroying them. But actually how many threads are created here? 4 threads are created, correct? So 4 threads are created here because there are 2 tests. As part of every test, 2 threads are created here. But when you mention it as test, only 2 threads will be created. But when you mention this one as classes or methods, the number of threads that are created are multiplied by the number of tests that are present inside the suit. So this is one of the important interview question. So that is why I asked you to watch the video till the end, guys. So now you got a clear understanding, right? So let's revise one more time. What is parallel execution? If you want to execute your test side by side, then that is called as parallel execution. And why do we need the parallel execution? To save the execution time, we need the parallel execution. And then how to perform the parallel execution? To perform the parallel execution, first of all, we need to create one TestNG Gxml file. And then we need to use 2 parameters or 2 attributes called parallel and then thread count. So both parameters should be present. If any of this thing is missing, the other one will not work. And one more thing, guys. So if you don't mention the thread count, by default, it will consider the thread count as 5. So if you mention only parallel, if you don't mention the thread count parameter here, by default, it will be picked as 5. Okay. If you mention the thread count without parallel attribute, then it will not be considered. But if you mention parallel attribute without thread count, by default 5 will be considered. And when you mention parallel value as false or none, it will be sequential execution only. Even though if you have mentioned these these attributes, it doesn't consider it as a parallel execution, because based on these values, it will be considered as sequential execution only. And when you mention the thread count as 1 also, it will be a sequential execution only. But when you mention the thread count more than 1, the positive integer more than 1, then it will become the parallel execution. And that too, that should be depending on the parallel value. Your parallel attribute value should not be false or none. Then only it will become the parallel. Okay. And then when you provide the thread count as negative value, you will get the illegal argument exception, guys. So these are the points that you need to remember. So this is a very, very, very important topic, not just for the interviews, but for our real execution also. It is very, very important, because we don't want to waste the execution time, right? We want to always save the execution time. We want to complete our execution maybe within an hour or within half an hour, but we don't want to wait for entire days to complete, right? So that's why we always implement the parallel execution concept. You just have to figure out which one you want to implement, like parallel equal test or parallel equal classes or parallel equal methods. So based on your framework, based on your automation suite, you need to implement that. Fine. So that is for this video, guys. I hope you understand this video. If you like the video, please hit the like button and also share this video with your friends. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.